today is we are moving into project planning. And so in our initiation phase, we would have started to identify our topic. We started to identify what it is we need. We started to most likely also identify who our project manager will be based on all of the team members and the persons associated with the project. So we're looking for our our pin person to hold the whole thing together. So in our planning phase is really where we see the project manager really starting to show their skill or their place really in this project. So they're helping to mostly set the objective. So as the project manager, your job really is to ensure that the objective of the project, it directly aligns with whatever is the goals of the organization, right? So you want to ensure that it's something that's achievable, etc. But really you want to make sure that it's in line with what the company is here to do, what the company wishes to achieve, etc. Right? So in the space where we are planning and starting to plan, we are setting those objectives, right? We want to find out what are our goals, what are our targets, what are our quotas. So it could be that we have a specific product that we're looking to launch on the market and we want to sell that. So maybe we want to see how much sales we can possibly get out of this. So we're going to run some sort of marketing campaign. We're going to start making our sales and we're going to see how much of this we can sell. Versus us saying, okay, so we have 500 of this specific item. I need to get them sold. Let's just sell all 500. So it could be that, you're working from one number and you're trying to get rid of what you have. Or it could be that you're just trying to see how much interest you can draw on a project. Just how much interest you can get onto something, onto an item so that you can sell that item um, to the largest possible target audience. So we're setting our objectives and we're trying to see what it is we want to do. Usually, also at this point of setting the objective, it usually also includes whatever the time scale is going to be. So if you have an objective that is very easily achievable, you most likely would have a shorter space of time to achieve it and you just go swiftly and get it done. Other times we have projects that will take a long time, and it might have a clear objective, but there are other times where you have a general objective and what you're doing exactly, what the goal or what the specific target is, it becomes clearer as you get closer to the end of that, right? The other thing we need to consider is if our project is a standalone project or if it's a um, part of a larger problem or part of a larger program. So what you're going to do here will really depend on what is happening in the company. If it's something that is part of a larger scheme, it means that you need to go back and do research on what happened. Well, a lot of research specifically on what happened in before your project. You most likely also want to at least reach out to the people who were involved in the setting of that first project or even the program and see what happened there, what were the lessons learned, how could we move forward and make this one better? Right. So if we're recognizing that we are part of a program, we understand that also when we're coming towards the end of our project, we are also looking to kind of hand the feedback that we got over to whichever team is going to be doing the next project. So if you have a program, you most likely have a situation where you want to make sure that you achieve or exceed those objectives. Why? Because it means that it's most likely moving on to somebody else. So you have to make sure that everything you're handing off is in tip-top shape, right? There's going to be a lot of critique there. The next thing we're looking at is we're looking at our budget, right? How much money do we have to get all of this done, right? It really looks different based on which project it is you are on. It could be a case where you might not even have any budget. Your budget might be $0. For instance, in this project, I'm giving you guys $0 to get it done. So I would expect that whatever project you come up with is something that is no cost at all to yourself. Or if any, it would be a very limited cost for maybe a subscription or something that you can also use for something else, right? I am not giving you money for this. So I don't expect you to put yourself into any sort of debt for this, but I do understand that, people have different objectives for what your final paper out of this course is going to do. So, I'm not sure if anybody needs a budget. But because it's not something that I am putting you guys because it's not something that I'm asking you all to do to manage some money. We don't have an actual budget you will have to create for your projects. However, in a project setting, you most likely will have a budget. Even if the budget is just really the salaries or the time that you have for the people, like you have something that you need to budget. And based on your budget, it also lets you know how much expenditure you have to to achieve these objectives, where you can possibly put money, and you would also look for what's most important for you to put money on, right? So when we're budgeting, it's a very long process. We're going to go through it when we're talking specifically about budgeting, but for now, we understand what budgeting is in our general lives. And by applying the same principles when it comes to a company, we have the same thing you need to do, except with a company, you have to physically record what you spend the money on, how you use the money, because that information has to go to somebody else because the money is not your own, right? So we're a lot more responsible for other people's money and budget than we are to ourselves. But that's just the nature of how external money works, right? The next thing we look at when we're doing our general planning is we're looking at a forecast. So as we're starting to look at what happened before us as well as what's happening now, and as we're going through the planning phase, sometimes we also kind of start to work, right? Sure, I asked you to do a paper that you're most likely writing your first draft of somewhere like next week. You should be writing your first draft. But it doesn't mean that you have not yet started writing drafts. It doesn't mean that you haven't started constructing paragraphs, at least in your head, right? Starting making those the speaking points that you want to expand on in your project. It doesn't mean that you haven't started that as yet, right? So in the planning phase, we start to see what's going to be needed in the project, and we start to make forecasts of what will happen by specific periods of time, right? So just like we're budgeting for our money, we're also budgeting for our time, right? So in budgeting for time specifically, we call that more forecasting, where you try to say, okay, by this point, I should have this done. And then right after that, I'm going to move into something else, et cetera, et cetera. The next part is to look at the organization. And in the organization, you want to look at the number of persons that you have, the type of skills that you have in the company as a whole. You want to look at the different responsibilities and duties of everybody on your team, as well as everybody in the company as a whole, because there are times where your project might need a skill that you do not have on the inside, but somebody else on that project team or in the company does have that skill that you can kind of go and ask questions to, or maybe even send an email off to get some additional information. So because of that, when it comes to the organization as a whole, that is something that we can very much consider in the planning, and we actually should look around the organization to see while we're planning for the resources that we know for sure we need to keep on hand, we should also be planning for people that we can possibly lean on in just in case, right? We're looking for incidentals. Um, Now, beyond the organization as a whole, we also start to look at the policies, not just the policies that will specifically impact our project, but the policies of the organization as a whole, because we want to make sure that everything that we do is compliant with uh, what is necessary to get, the full project done. Um, uh, Beyond that, we start to look at procedures. So policies, it will let us know what you can get done, what specific attitudes or actions can be taken in the case of different situations, right? So we have policies in place, but then we also need to see the procedure. So, okay, so the policy is we do this, but your procedure is how do we do it? What is the step by step for carrying out that actual policy, right? So who do we need to get involved? who is not necessary to be involved, who is absolutely vital to the process, who can we not move forward without? And what steps and stages do we take to get those done? So when we're looking at policies, you can think about something all of you or most of you would have or would eventually work in some sort of organization that will have things like disciplinary rules. The disciplinary rules aren't there to scare you. The policies that we make in HR, they're not there to harm you. They're actually there to protect you, right? But policies are there for different things. So let's talk about disciplinary action, right? Just because it's something that just popped in my mind. With disciplinary procedures, what you find is that there would be a different procedure or a different policy for different types of, I don't want to say bad behavior or like my mind is going to deviant, but it's not deviant either. Anything that is of reproach, any action that's of reproach. So if we need to correct anybody for anything that they did in the company, you usually have scales that you can do that. So a complaint. So maybe the employee, you find that they did something. Maybe they were a bit rude or disrespectful to their manager. Maybe they were insubordinate, and you need to deal with that. As an employer or a representative of an employer, you do not just go firing people um, or putting any sort of disciplinary action on them without looking at what the policy is, right? We need to see what a policy is for each specific violation. So for instance, somebody sleeping on the job would have a different reproach or a different action taken against them than somebody that is being insubordinate. They might be similar, but they're most likely not going to be exact, at least not in the wording of them. So the policy is that if you're insubordinate, we take you through multiple steps, right? So we're taking you through, first you get an oral complaint or you get an oral warning. So I call the employee in and we have a discussion, right? This was not okay. Let's not do this again. After we've had an oral discussion, the next thing that happens, if it happens again, is you get a written warning. After your written warning, if it happens again, you get a short suspension, maybe 3 days without pay or something like that. So the policy is don't be insubordinate to your supervisor, right? Especially not without reason. But the procedure is we take you through these different steps to correct your behavior, right? We don't just do what we feel like. There is something in place for your supervisors and your managers to ensure that they work with you as best as they can, but also so that um, you both protected in whatever actions are taken for whatever disciplinary measure we need to have, right? So that's the difference really between policy and procedure. The very next one is your standard. So your standard is going to be is going to be how we define your performance. So we're talking about projects, and so we're also talking about successful projects. But what makes one project successful versus another project? It could be that one project was completed in time. It could be that another project was completed with a better budget, right? We don't know, right? So when it comes to the success of your project, that's going to be defined by specifically which project we're talking about, which standard it is we're trying to uphold. So the standard is something that has to be set at this point in time. It has to be set by the team based on their objectives, based on what is in front of them. That is what will determine what the standard is and what we mean when we say the project is successful versus what we mean when we say the project was not successful, right? That's going to be defined by the team in the project planning phase. It's not something that's given to you. The customer can guide it. For instance, the customer can say, hey, if my project breaks even, you will get paid. right? If my project breaks even, or if my project is profitable by a certain margin, then I will consider this a successful project or a successful product launch if the product launch was the project, right? So the customer can give guidance as in they want to say that, okay, this is something we need. This is what I need for me to say that I'm satisfied with what you've handed to me. But the team now has to sit with themselves and recognize what specifically they recognize are things that are needed to make this project successful. Because the simple fact that they came to you for you to actually run the project for them, it means that they do not have all of the information to do it on their own. So what you want to do here is you want as a team to sit and define what success looks like for your customer. And then you also want to talk a bit about what success looks like for your team. All right. So I'll stop here and I'll ask if anybody has any questions on, project planning. Like, do we have any questions on what project planning is, about how we want to plan projects or anything like that? Any questions at all? All right, so it doesn't seem like we have any questions on project planning, so I'm assuming that everybody's up and ready to go. So I do have a little presentation I have for you, because as we go through the rest of this, I want you to have a visual representation really of what it is we're doing for, today. So hold on, let me get my presentation up. So I asked for feedback when we met last week, and the feedback was that yes, I could give you some visual aid that would help. So this is my visual aid to take us just through this. Now, of course, we know we're reading from the textbook. I want to continue reading from the textbooks because I think that will help you with your studying, if we're reading from the same places, so we have the same text, right? So we just went through generally what was needed for effective project planning and how we go about planning projects. And the first thing in project planning we need to do is, why did they do that? All right, there we go. So I'm gonna just pull this up. It's not really the project, it's not like a work breakdown, like a real work breakdown structure for now. It's just an example that I just pulled off the internet, but it's to let you know that, hey, we're talking about this right now. So when it comes to your work breakdown structure, what we're essentially doing is we're saying that all of the things that we need to get done for your initiation, planning, etc., we're basically listing them all out. So for your projects right now, you should have a master list of things you need to do, right? So for the one we have up right now, we see that in the initiation phase, they wanted to appoint a project manager and the team. They want to define what the project goals look like. They want to get the customers buy-in or the clients buy-in, and they want to assess feasibility. So by assessing feasibility, they want to make sure that this is something that's worthwhile pursuing, that at the end of it, it will bring them back more than they have invested into it. So that is what they want to achieve in their initiation phase. Initiation, just as we went through, it pretty much looks the same way. In your planning now, that's where you start to do your risk analysis. You create a structure, schedule, and a task plan. They want to set their budget and they want to establish communication process. In the executing phase, they want status updates. They want to compare the plan versus actual. They most likely want to do that on a daily basis or so on. They want to improve processes continuously. So if they have something they have to do repeatedly, and they do it one time and they find that they have small, not shortcuts, but small things they can do to change to make it more effective or efficient, they can do that. And then documentation. They want to make sure that they document things at every phase, right? So I just mentioned efficient and effective, and I do want to clarify that when we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about, all right, So effectiveness is getting it done, right? Efficiency is essentially getting it done the right way every time. So if we're thinking effectiveness, we're throwing a dart to a dartboard and you're trying to get the dart onto the dartboard. You're hoping to get it in the middle, but you're throwing it, hoping to just get it onto the dartboard. That's effectiveness, getting it done. Efficiency is trying to get it to the bullseye every single time without fail. That's the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. So efficiency, it does give you a straight path to get what you want to get done. It also usually cuts your time and your cost to get it done. But sometimes it calls for you to skip other parts of what the process usually entails. So because of that, I don't want to necessarily advertise for efficiency. I do find that in lean projects and projects where you have like a small amount of people that are actually able to execute the teamwork. Like if that is the case, it probably makes sense for you to be more lean and push for efficiency. But if you can, I would say try to be as effective as you can, right? Efficiency is great, but effectiveness also works. Hold on. Somebody just is trying to come in. Let's see. All right. Yeah. So then in their control phase, they want to make sure they control the scope so that scope doesn't creep up. They want to change management processes. They want to perform tracking. And quality management. So here they're starting to sample whatever is the output of the execution phase. So initiation, we're starting to know what we want to do. In planning, we start to know, well, we know for sure what we want to do and we start doing it. In execution, we're really doing it. We're heading straight forward. In controlling, we're heading forward still, but we're looking at what's happening and we're starting to sample our output to make sure that it's of whatever standard we set in the planning phase, a planning or initiation phase. Then the last part is closure. So here we are pretty much done. We're wrapping up. We are making notes of our lessons learned. We're planning, we're writing any reports we have to. We are delivering the product to the customer, or, we're closing off what we have here. We're removing any of the, if it's a product that we were selling and we're pretty much going to stop selling it now, we're packaging everything that we have left at our warehouse and we're sending it back to the customer. And then we're closing out this project. So we close, we have our close-out meeting, and then we disband as a group, right? So that's usually this is what a work breakdown structure looks for a very basic project. So yours will look similar to this, except the listed items are most likely going to look different. Right, and you do not have to have the same ones that they have here. This is just a very general example of what a work breakdown structure looks like. Right, so do we have any questions currently on what project planning is, or how we go about creating our work breakdown structure? No? All right, so let's talk a little bit about it. So we just went through basically, oh, I have a question. Can anybody unmute and answer? Right, I want to see what are you guys seeing currently on the screen?
The textbook page.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm on the, pardon?
Page 411.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, in our textbook, as we go through planning, we see there's general planning, there's life cycles, we go through proposal presentation. So this would be where we recognize what we need to do in our initiation phase. We already started writing it down in our planning phase, and we are giving our proposal around for project manager is preparing the proposal so that we can get that proposal signed off. Everybody is good with what we're going to do. So once we have a proposal, it means we generally have a very close idea as to what a work breakdown structure is going to look like, right? So at that, once you start putting it in writing and you've created a proposal, you're saying, listen, client, this is what I want to provide based on what you asked for, based on what you asked me for to deliver. This is how I've designed this project to run. The customer will come back and say, yes, this is great. Or they'll say, oh, can we make some changes in specific parts? Once your proposal is signed by both parties, it means that everything is good. We want to go ahead and start. So at that point, we have our kickoff meeting. And in the kickoff meeting, here you'll see it here. So in a kickoff meeting is where the team meets for the first time. So you and your group member would have already had your kickoff meeting when I asked you to, like last week and the week before, some of you. So you would have already had your kickoff meetings. And in those meetings, you would have said, listen, hi, everyone, I am so, and this is my part to play on this. We're working together. We all start to agree on our rules. We start to socialize. We start to understand everybody. Right. So the next part again is understanding participants' roles. So while we've had this this introduction and so forth at our kickoff meeting, as we're understanding everybody's roles, we know what our project manager's role specifically is, but we need to start to understand what everybody else's role is in the project. And it's not just the project team we're looking at here. We're also looking at, remember we talked a bit about that project champion. That is the person that's going to most likely be sitting on the executive board of whatever company it is you're working for. And they're the person who is kind of keeping track to make sure that the company works in, the company is continuously seeing your project as a favor, right? Or in a favorable light. So they are not a spy, but they're kind of spying if you want to think of it that way. So they're sitting on the executive team or the management team of the company, and they're making sure that you get all the resources you need. Or it could be a case where, you know, maybe you need a specific employee that is also very important to another team, and that person has the power to talk to that individual's manager to work out some sort of deal where you can split their time, right? So the person usually has more influence in the company directly than the project manager, and that champion would be able to help you in that way. So we're looking at other roles. So we're looking at our stakeholders and what roles they play here. We want to look at line managers, or you can also call them functional managers, because what they do is they make sure that the employee is still managing their day job, because a lot of times when projects run, while they do have like a dedicated project manager, they don't usually have dedicated teams. So the teams usually have to do their day jobs and then also help out with the project on the side. So the line manager or the person's functional manager is going to be making sure that they do as they're supposed to. And then, well, senior management, we talk about the sponsor or the champion, right? So we know what our manager or project manager is doing already. So I'm not going to review that again, but we have to understand the roles of these people who are the most influential people on the project, on the outside of the project. We have to also know the roles for the people in the project, as well as the other external or the other stakeholders external to the company. We have to manage all of them. All right, so somebody else is coming in. Let me let that person in. Sorry, like I always have to like stop and go back to the meeting. Here we go. All right. So then they take us into project planning here, and let me go down to the next page. So they're going to take you through really what we're doing in planning. So this is a lot of what I just talked about. So we are making sure that we know what elements need to be in the project for us to consider it successful. We need to make sure that responsibility is that everybody understands their responsibility in the project. we need to make sure that resources are where they need to be. We start to create documents, like the statement of work or project specifications. We start to schedule our milestones. So if you are working on an agile project, you really, really, really need to start working on your milestones from the very beginning of your project phase. And then you create your work breakdown structure. So milestones would be us saying, okay, so we have 5 major things, or in this case, let's use our project here. So for this course, you have, I believe, 3 major things or 3 major milestones. You're going to have, well, maybe 4 if we consider your mid-semester. So one is your mid-semester exam. One is going to be your project document. One is going to be your final exam, and then the other is going to be your final presentation. Right? So those are going to be your 4 major milestones. Those are the 4 major things that you need to complete. Right? And so in completing each of those, for instance, your final exam, you have to study. So studying is going to be a task underneath the activity of final exam. Just like writing the paper, you can't write the paper in one day. You really shouldn't try to do that. I'm going to beg you all not to do that. But if you're writing the paper, you also need to have a draft one. I'm not going to ask you to have a 1,000 different drafts, but I would ask you to at least have a draft one that you review before you have a final, right? Don't just write the final right away. It's gonna be very difficult. But you're gonna have to go through researching. You're gonna have to go through writing the first parts of it. You're gonna have to go through, picking topics and all these different things. So under the one role or under the one milestone of your final project paper, you have multiple things you need to do or complete under there. So while you recognize the 4 major milestones here, right, you're starting to think of your work breakdown structure. That is the specific activity or the specific tasks that fall under each activity. Then you start to think about, in your statement of work, we need a start date. So I already gave you a start date, an end date. We also have an end date already. We know our major milestones. And then, well, written reports would be any data that we compiled before we started the project. So in this case, when you all have to, for whatever paper you have to do, whatever references you choose to use, if you're using 5 medical journals or, well, not journals, 5 articles from journals, or you're using 20 articles from journals, just getting all that together is pretty much also, kind of part of just compiling the data that you need before you start writing. So in the statement of work, what is included there? Your statement of work, it really just has the scope for the project. Your project, well, scope, you have the project scope also, you have your scope statement, and then your statement of work. So I'm gonna allow you guys to read that from your text. And the next part is your project specifications. This is where you say, okay, these are the specific things we need to do. We're setting the standards for that project. We see the word standard showing up here. It's not just a standard for pricing, because I see that that's what they specifically mention here, but it's also your standard for what you consider to be the standard that you need to meet for each milestone. So for instance, a standard could be for you to complete this course, you can't just pass the course. You have to pass it with a specific percentage. You need at least a D to pass the course, right? So in this case, the standard is, the lowest possible standard you can hit is a D, but maybe for you as an individual, your personal standard is nothing lower than a B, right? You can tell yourself, I don't want anything lower than a B. A B is my standard, right? If I don't at least get a B, I don't feel like I completed this course well enough, right? So standards are inherently personal, right? So the project manager can plan that. Me as a lecturer, I can plan that all of my students complete this course with at least 75%. But if you personally don't want to work towards that, there's really nothing I can do, right? So we plan the standards as a team, but everybody has to interpret them personally. So but really in project specifications is where we go through what each person needs to do and what the standard of completion is for each one of those. And so while it's the project manager giving you information, it also heavily is in everybody interpreting it correctly. And I say that here because oftentimes you find that as you go through the project manager still has to go back and monitor how people achieve those standards. So it's not just for the project manager to say, hey, this is what you need to do. It's for the project manager to understand what that being done correctly looks like so that they can make sure that it's done correctly at the end of the process. The next one is scheduling those milestones. So now that we have our standards and we have our specifications, we start putting timelines and we start allocating budgets towards it. And then we hit our work breakdown structure. So I just showed you a picture of what a basic work breakdown structure looks like. And so, of course, we have a lot of write-up about it because work breakdown structure is it really is the backbone of your project, right? So here is where we really lay out every single thing that needs to get done. So for you, if you're writing a research paper, you really need to state, that you need to put some time towards research, you need to put some time towards writing a draft, towards writing a final draft, towards also making a project presentation, as in like a PowerPoint presentation for you to present. You possibly also want to have practicing your presentation so that you don't show up to class and present in front of everyone and you feel nervous. So yeah, in here is where you really spend time thinking about every single thing that needs to be done, and start putting time and resources towards each one of them, right? So your work breakdown structure, the elements of a good work breakdown structure really is that all of the elements of it is they're manageable. So we understand that while you give responsibility to people, you make sure as a project manager and also as team members, we make sure that what we're asking people to do is actually manageable to them, and that they understand what they need to do. We mention independence here. Well, the textbook mentions independence here, because we want to know which specific tasks can start by themselves or which task is dependent on another task being completed, right? So for instance, you can't present your paper unless you have completed or written your paper, right? Or yeah, not complete, but written. So you can't present it unless you've at least written it. So you can't present. So presentation is going to be dependent on you completing the research paper, or at least most of the research paper, right? However, the research paper is completely independent of the presentation because you can complete the paper and not do the presentation, right? But you can't do the presentation without the paper. So that's how dependence and independence works when it comes to project management. Beyond that, we have integratable. So we want to see how our total package is. We want to make sure that we're not doing things that are unnecessary. For me, that's the biggest part that I look at when it comes to integration. It's not necessarily that every single thing I do on a project is something that's going to be the most necessary part of it. So for instance, a lot of projects that I work on, I try to ensure that my team feels appreciated. So when it comes to things like birthdays and so forth, if I have a birthday coming up, or if anybody on the team has a birthday coming up, I do something to make it memorable, right? Get them a gift. We can plan to maybe we do breakfast today or we do lunch in honor of this person. We get the things that they like and we just celebrate them on this day. Celebrating a birthday is not integral to my project being completed. However, I find that it's one of those things that does encourage my team members to want to be around, right? So when it comes to things that are integratable, it could be things that are necessary and 100% a part of what we need to do, but it can also be things that really aid what we're trying to do, right? But really, you don't want to do things that are completely unnecessary. So if I'm working with a team that maybe we're working for, maybe we've never met before and we you know, like, I don't know if any of you have ever, so a lot of times I like to jump on to like sometimes forums or somebody has a panel or something like that. So sometimes I jump onto those, but if it's not something that's necessary to me, maybe the topic was advertised one way, but then when we go to it, they cover it a different way, you just leave, right? So if it's not like integral to what you're doing or it doesn't affect it in any positive way, you don't need to necessarily do them. And the last part of a good work breakdown structure is that each part of it is measurable. We're not saying, so when we're saying measurable, what we mean is that we want to make sure that we can track it. So for it to be trackable, it needs to be measurable in some way, shape, or form. So a birthday is easily measurable, right? It happens on one day. On the one day we say happy birthday, and we feel like, okay, that's enough to recognize the birthday. So in that way, it's one day, it's easy to say, okay, we recognize the birthday. That's an easily measurable something. However, it could get more difficult where we're saying, um, uh, why am I getting no examples on something that is measurable? It's insane. Maybe we're saying that we want to print this report. We want to complete our report and we want our report to have, oh, yeah, this is something special. Like I gave you your research paper and I told you there's specific things you need to have inside. So for instance, you all need to have some sort of literature review. You need to have a abstract. You need to have conclusion with recommendations, right? So I've listed specific things that you need to have on that paper. And while I haven't told you how much grades go for each one of those things, each one of them will be given a grade. So that's how I am making your paper a measurable metric versus just saying, oh, just complete the paper and I'm not going to tell you what I need to have inside. If I don't tell you what I want inside the research paper and I just say, go write a research paper and then bring it back to me, I'm not giving you an easily measurable assignment. You have to then go up and take it upon yourself to kind of guess what the measurements are, right? So any good project manager will ensure that when we set goals, they're manageable, they're independent, they're as independent as they can be, they're integratable into the entire project, and that they're measurable in some way, shape, or form, so that we can ensure that we get it done and get it done correctly, right? So those are the things we look for when we're creating those activities in your work breakdown structure. So as you all are thinking of that, let me know if you have any trouble, but these are the things you're looking for in it. So your textbook does give you a great overview of how to go about creating work breakdown structure. And yeah, so lots of info on it. I'm not going to read through all of these. But then we have some basic problems that we have. So sometimes when it comes to work breakdown structure, you maybe make the details too small and you're not really able to measure them because they're just too insignificant. It could be also that you started and then you no longer have access to something. So how do you go about readjusting that work breakdown structure? So when it comes to decomposition, like it's really just think of it like reshaping what you need to do. Hello? Like, so let me stop here. Let me stop here and ask if anybody has any questions on how to think of starting to complete a work breakdown structure. Let me head back to class. Let me come back and get some discussion going in here. All right, Janicia? Janicia?
Which one, Miss? There's two of us.
All right, you that answer. Yeah, so how do you feel about what do you think a work breakdown structure is?
For me, it's a detail, like steps of what on how we're gonna go about doing things.
Exactly. Right. Is there anybody here that is a project manager? That is one of the managers of the project? Like, I don't know who the managers are. I haven't looked at the documents as yet.
Yes.
Anyone? I heard something just now.
Yes, miss.
Hi, Celine. Yeah, so when I go through what a work breakdown structure is, did you start picturing what your work breakdown structure will look like in your group? Have you been able to pinpoint at least like 2 or 3 activities that will be on yours?
Yes, I did. So for mine, it's would be a research project. So I've pinpointed that we would need to do data collection through case studies or reading articles, and then afterwards we would need to clean up the data more for analysis.
Okay, so happy to hear that. And that's really what I was hoping. I was hoping that as we were going through it, all of you, whether you're the project manager or not, you start to think about, how specifically you have to do yours. You start thinking about tasks that can be in yours, so that when you do have to complete it, it doesn't take too much time, right? I don't feel like I've ever spent a lot of time on work breakdown structure. Like most of the time is usually spent in discussion, in creating standards, in creating objectives. Once you have your objectives, you can generally look to see what procedures were taken by other persons and look at it and adapt it to whatever you need to do, right? So your work breakdown structure, it does not have to come from you. You can go online and search work breakdown structure for a research paper or work breakdown structure for just about anything, and you'll see a template on how other people have gone about doing it, right? So you don't have to always reinvent the wheel when it comes to it. But you do have to spend time adapting it to where you need it to be, right? You don't just pick up somebody's work breakdown structure and go with it. Yeah. So let me head back to me, look at the text. Let's see if there's anything else we need to go through on WBS for now. No, I'm not gonna test you on decomposition anyways, so I'm not gonna spend any more time on that. Yeah. But we're WBS decomposition is really just taking taking the work breakdown structure and finding really, really tiny projects inside of all of them. It's one of those things that doesn't really happen a lot, mainly because most projects now, especially it worked a lot when projects were long, and we were also using the traditional method. However, now most projects that are really long, they just make them agile so that we complete them in phases, and the client or customer is able to really manage the project in phases and also manage the budget in phases rather than just having them run on for long periods of time. We didn't even get into talking about types of projects or anything. But they didn't call for that. I don't know why they don't want us to discuss that. But maybe we will talk about types of projects at some point, but not right now. All right, so the next thing we're gonna look at is so we looked at the work breakdown structure. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. All right. So when we're looking at our WBS, we saw that. And then the next thing we do is I'm taking you over here and I'm showing you stuff that you don't quite understand, right? So what are we looking at here? What we're looking at here is the critical path method. right? And what does it even mean? Now, when we look at this diagram, as somebody who has worked with projects for a while, I immediately can understand what's happening, but somebody who hasn't will be really confused as to what's happening. But if they actually look at it and like read, I feel like most people can kind of guess what is happening, right? So I will ask any person here who maybe has not interacted with one of these diagrams to kind of guess what's happening, just as an exercise, because I want to see where you guys are going with your thought processes and the course, right? So anyone can unmute and try to answer, or I'll suggest someone. Okay, somebody, that was Hurton coming in. Yeah, somebody else who was here. All right, Sarwati, I see D. What's your last name? Devi. Are you there? Let's see if no, she's not. Amira? Wow, like, are you guys nervous to try this one? Let me see who else I can call on. Stephanie?
Good night, Miss.
Hi.
Let me just make a guess. Is this like tasks that we have to complete and the steps that we have to follow and the order that we have to follow to complete it?
Yes, it is. And what do you think about the red ones? The red lines? Or the
These
red lines
are
versus the black lines?
the red ones are the most important tasks, or the urgent ones, and the black are the least urgent ones.
All right, yes, you're right. So not necessarily urgent, but what we call them are critical, right? So hand of applause, I give you one. And that was a great interpretation really of what this is, even without reading anything, right? I'm guessing you haven't, but you might have. So what's happening here is that we see lots of numbers, but if you look at them, they make sense. Like they move in order. So you see number one starting by itself. It's at the beginning here. So this right away, I can tell you this is an independent activity. It starts by itself. It doesn't wait on anyone, right? Then we have number two, right? So one feeds into two, but one also feeds into three, and then one feeds into four. Then we see three, we have one feeding into it, and then we're sending whatever we generate here down to four. But we're also sending whatever we generate here over to six, so it's going in two directions. And we see that happening in a set of different spaces. The other thing that you notice is you see these numbers. So these numbers are letting you know how much days you have to complete it. So the best possible completion time and the worst possible completion time. That's how you can think of it. When we're going into talking about nodes, we're going to get into that a lot more, like when we're talking about PERT. But for now, when we're just looking at a critical path, I just want you to know that your critical path, those are the activities that you absolutely 100% need to complete, and you need to complete it within standard, right? Anything along the critical path cannot be delayed. A delay on the critical path delays the entire project. One single day delay at number 3 will delay number 4 starting. It will also delay number 6 starting. So because 6 and 4 are absolutely dependent on 3 being completed on time, they are dependent projects. Well, dependent activities. But at the same time, right? Anything here, any one of them, not just 3, like 6 that feeds into 8, they all will delay the project completion time if we go beyond the how much days? Like, okay, 4 days. Yeah, if we go beyond the 4 days that are allotted for it, right? So The critical path, it lets you know, it gives you a denotation of the space that you absolutely cannot mess up on when it comes to your project. So let me go to the textbook and I'll pull that up for you. And okay. So we were here, we're over here now. Yeah. So what the critical path is us doing network scheduling. And so what network scheduling is that we take all of the tasks on a work breakdown structure, we put numbers on them in accordance to when they need to be completed. Well, in accordance to the order that they need to be completed in, because we would have assigned order at the work breakdown structure phase. So what we're doing now is, for the fundamentals, it takes you through just understanding, understanding that with networking, we use multiple, the first thing they mention is that we do use multiple graphs when we are managing that network. So we do have a Gantt chart. Yeah, we're doing Gantt charts next week, but a Gantt chart is essentially an extension of your work breakdown structure also. But we're looking at your Gantt chart, we're looking at different milestones and any bubble charts. So what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to build a network pretty much of everything that you need to get done and when you need to get it done. We talk about graphical representation and review technique. That's basically putting things into charts in ways that we can very easily understand it. So with a Gantt chart, while it's a Gantt chart, it looks more like a table, but what GERT specifically speaks about is this. So what we saw just now, the critical path method, critical path falls along the network. So the network really is the entire diagram. All of these different names that we call it, like GERT really is just that we put it into a form that is graphically represented. But this is a network diagram. It's showing you what you need to do at each different at each pocket of time. So when we look here, this is essentially a work breakdown structure, right? So it tells you the schedule of what you need to get done, and then you put them all on the graph. You denote which one is the element, which one is an activity, and then which ones are on the critical path. We always try to make the critical path look bold or in some different way because we want to recognize, we want everybody to know by just glancing at it that this is urgent, this is super important. Do not mess up on these phases. And then we start talking about PERT, right? When we're talking about PERT, all we're saying is that we are taking your network diagram. So I do have an example, but it looks pretty much the same. So with the PERT diagram, what we're doing is we are, just like we did on that one where we had the notes at the top, which gave you which how much days you needed to complete it. Your PERT diagram goes through and starts to calculate. What am I doing here? What am I doing here now? Okay. Yeah, your PERT diagram goes through and identifies what slack you have on your project and what you don't have slack on. By slack, we mean extra time. What can you spend extra time on and which ones you cannot spend extra time on? So we're gonna have to go through calculating that. With a dependency, we're looking for things that are, we're looking to see how each activity depends on each other. So we generally have three types. We have the mandatory, we have the discretionary, and then we have the external dependencies. Those three are fun. Please go research on them. But dependencies really speaks to when you need to get something done and what is happening as what's happening on the diagram with regards to other projects, like how each activity along our work breakdown structure or along our network interacts with the activity in front of, or the preceding activity and the activities that come after, or the succeeding activities. Then we talk about slack. So when we're talking about slack specifically, we're looking for the earliest start time, we're looking for the latest start time, and we're looking for any slack that can give you a day or two extra, just in case something happens on that specific activity. So based on what I told you when it comes to critical path method, I don't know if any of you have picked up, but I'm saying here that slack is a calculation of extra time that you might have on a specific activity. And you should recognize right away that when it comes to your critical path, there is no slack there, right? There is no slack across your critical path. When you calculate it, you will see that the slack on a critical path, along the critical path, it always equals to 0, right? That's essentially the earliest start time minus the latest start time. That gives you your slack, right? So when it comes to activities along the critical path, they have no slack ever. The ones that are not most likely have slack. They're going to be differences in with regards to how much slack is on each part of the project. Like, it's not like the project we start off saying, oh, everybody's gonna have a slack of a day or two, right? We don't do that. But you can calculate and see just how much slack you have on each one of your activities. But along the critical path, there's no slack. So what PERT does is PERT is where we start to, so first we had our network diagram, right? Well, first we had a work breakdown structure. We turned our work breakdown structure into a graphical representation, right? So we turn our work breakdown structure into this, which is a graphical representation of what we need to do. It's our network diagram for this project. Then we added these notes that specifically tell us what's your earliest start time, what's your latest start time, what slack you have on each project. And once you start calculating slack, then we basically turn it into PERT, a PERT chart, right? So this is what your PERT diagram pretty much looks like. Let me show you. I do have one on your presentation. That has slack calculated into it. Hold on. Let me stop sharing here. And okay, let me just move and see if I can just switch it over. No. Teams does not allow me to do that. But you know what? I think I was sharing my window just now. So why did I stop it? Okay. Sorry, y'all. I talk to myself sometimes. Yeah. So this is a network diagram, right? And this is a PERT chart. So what we're doing here is we're looking at your earliest start and finish, as well as your latest start and finish. And we're looking to see how much slack we have going across. So we can recognize right away these red lines means that this is our critical path, and our critical path has 0 slack. You can look at this by looking at your earliest start time and your latest start time and seeing that there's no difference between the two, right? Whereas along the network that's not on the critical path, we do see 11 and 26 and then 25 and 40, right? So we do have slack on these others. So, well, float. We have our total float here of 15, slack, float, same thing, by the way. So in this case here, you have a total float of 15 days for this project. This one here, this specific activity has 5. Yeah, 5. For the others, they don't, right? These ones along the critical path, there's no slack, no float, right? So any delay here will specifically cause this to be late. So when we look at this here, we see drag happening for 10 days, which means this was 10 days late. Then we see drag here on this activity for 15 days, and then a further 5 drag on these two. When we add it up, we see that we ended up completing our project 20 full days late. Right? So we started this one late, which caused us to hand it over here late, and then hand this one over late. And it ended up holding our whole project back by 20 full days. So I do have to show you how to calculate those, but I do want to take a little break. I feel like I've done a lot of talking. And so for now, what we've done is we have gone through basically creating your work breakdown structure, then creating your network diagram and highlighting your critical path, right? So while the textbook has it like this, the course outline has it like this, essentially, I like to put it this way, right? I like to identify my network first. I want to calculate my float, because once I calculate my float, it tells me right away where my critical path is, right? So once I highlight my critical path here in the PERT, I don't really need to, do this part. So essentially, this should always, it should always be done. And because when we're doing PERT, we're calculating slack, we can right away see where it's gonna be. So there's really anyways, it doesn't make a difference. We identify a critical path as soon as we create our network diagram, and then we find out how much float we have on the other activities. Once we're done that, we move towards thinking about how to complete the project as a whole, right? And how to manage everything that we have going on. So I'm not going to get into this. I'm just going to leave it here, but we're going to go through the logical framework just now. For now, we just pretty much stop right here at our PERT chart. And I will stop and ask if we have any questions at all on creating that network diagram, the work breakdown structure, or your PERT chart. Also note, we're going to work an example when I'm back. So if you had a question about an example, it's going to come up after. But for now, based on the literature, do you have any questions based on everything that we've gone through, or do you all feel like you understand how network diagrams work with regards to projects? No feedback? We all feel comfortable with it?
Yes, miss.
All right, great. So in that case, you guys go take a break. We will be come back in about 15 minutes. I would say about 6:45. Yeah, we'll start back at 6:45. So just go take a stretch, get some water. Don't drink coffee at 6 p.m. Or maybe you could. I would suggest it because you all should be sleeping soon enough. So go take a walk, get some water, check on the kids, and then come back at 6:45 and we'll resume class then. All right, so over here, we're talking about work breakdown structure. And a lot of it really has to do with us trying to figure out what it is we need to do, when we need to get it done, so that we make sure that everybody is able to, complete their part in a good enough time span. So there are times where your WBS will also function as a responsibility matrix, right? So I'll show you one that I did a while ago. I'll just share the screen because I do have a lot. All right, so this is an old file I found, right? So we had a work breakdown structure where we were saying that it needed to be completed by a specific time, but this is what it looks like. So up here would be the major objective of our project. Like the one thing we need to do above everything else is up here. Beyond that, there were 4 other deliverables that we needed to complete. So for you, up here is passing the course, right? Which is very similar to what this one was, right? So up here, passing the course. Here, you've got multiple things you need to do in order to pass the course, the major things you need to do. Under each one of them, you have specific things that they fall into. All right, so this one has two objectives or 2 goals. This one has a couple more. This one actually has none. It just stands alone by itself. This one has 3 major ones, and then under each of them, there's more, right? So based on what is needed of your project, it will tell you how your work breakdown structure will be. It can be in the form like this, where it's a flow chart and everything is coming down, or it could also be like this. So ignore over here, right? What you can look at is just over here. So all of the different tasks that you need to do in order to complete the project would be on the side, and then you can have responsibility as to who is responsible for which part of it. Right? So everybody has something that they're responsible for, and then we understand this one means responsible, this one means you are supporting the responsibility of it, this one is everybody works on those specific parts of it, and then here is whoever needs to be informed or consulted about something specific. So this person you'd usually find as your project you usually find them as your project champion or that project sponsor. Up here is usually the team, the specific team that you are working with. So this is a very light breakdown of, well, actually a pretty detailed breakdown of exactly what your work breakdown structure can look like, right? But this one is a work breakdown structure with a responsibility matrix attached. And the only difference is that it says who is responsible for what at which specific part. Then we took those activities and we plotted them all here. We said what needs to come before what. You've got the arrows, just ignore all of those. But essentially what we did is we took our work breakdown structure, which is these same things. We put dates on it for when things need to be completed for, a start date and an end date. And your start date and end date is the earliest start and earliest finish. While you have an earliest start and earliest finish, we also needed to have a duration for how long each one of the activities should last, right? How many days they should last for. And also how late, what's the latest you can finish one activity, so a late finish. Based on that, we will then be able to calculate any slack that we have, right? Well, and then the responsibility, but yeah, that is something else. So what we're doing here is we're creating a Gantt chart for what has to happen when, right? So this is what a Gantt chart looks like. It's literally saying that on these days, we'll be working on specific items. So we look at it and we see, okay, activity 1 will be completed within these 4 days, right? Then whatever is given here, it goes down to these other ones, and then yeah, and then they're completed in whatever days they need to be completed. But what it does is it creates an overlap diagram sort of everything that you need to get done within this project. Now, there is actually lots of software you can use to create these. Popular ones are like Microsoft Dynamics. That is really good. This one here was done in Excel. You can also use Microsoft Access, but that's really if you also have a lot of information that you need to store in it. You can create something like this on Excel, but the best one to do if you're going to use a Microsoft platform would be Microsoft Dynamics. Outside of Microsoft Dynamics, there's also when I remember, I'll tell you what the other software is that usually helps with it. And the good thing about those software is that if it's specifically for project management, they usually have templates that you can just fill rather than doing what we did here, which is just create something from scratch, spent a whole lot of time on it. Like this took ages, right? Now, beyond that, we also created the activity network diagram from it. So those activities that we had, we used the information here to calculate your latest start date, right? Your earliest start date, your earliest finish, and then we you calculated that against our latest finish to be able to understand how much slack and everything we have. So once we have all that information, what you did is you just put it down here. So we've got each activity, right? So when we look at it, this is what it is. The activity is here. So this one here is creating our project contract. Here would have been creating our project charter. Your earliest start date, your slack, your latest start. Here you have the duration. Here you've got the responsibility of which member has that responsibility. Here you have your earliest finish, and here you have your latest finish. And this is what all those numbers around your nodes look like. So when we first created the work breakdown structure, it just has a listing of everything you have to do. And then the second thing, okay, somebody just tried to come in. Okay, so I no longer see the thing popping up here. So anyways, back to this. Yeah. So the work breakdown structure was really just listing all of these things down, saying that, okay, we need to get these done. Then once you started to create your activity diagram, we're looking at how long you need to spend on each one of them, when you could start, when you could finish, and then we just plot all of them in specific spots. And then you have, of course, some sort of guide. So the example I showed you did not have a guide. So this guide, or you can also call it like a key or a legend, it tells people exactly what they're reading. So when you look at this, it's a little easier for you to understand which one is the latest finish versus which one is the earliest finish, who has responsibility, earliest finish, slack, well, slack here, latest finish, and then the full duration of it. Right, so all these different numbers, they do separate things, and they generally work together for us to understand what's happening here with this project. And so while you can plan for how it should look, you also need to update it for if things do change. Right, but this is essentially how it looks when you create one. And the reason I chose to use this one, because I couldn't find the example that I had worked for you, is because this one here is essentially what I sort of modeled. Like this was, anyways, so this one here is literally kind of modeling what the class you're currently taking is. So you could take pointers here on exactly what you need to do. And as you look across again, you can see that we have some that are white and some that are red. Naturally, the ones that are red is going to be our critical path. So yes, you have everything we've calculated, when activities need to be done, how much slack you have on each one, slack or float. I should note that those two words are used interchangeably, just like we use delay or lag interchangeably for if you spend too long and go over time on a specific activity. But what you're looking to do really is you're looking to make sure that however you lay out your diagram is going to be useful for the people using it. So this was useful to my team, right? This might not be useful to your team. You might want to have yours look slightly different. You might want to use different software for it. Oracle, that is it. The next one is Oracle. So one is Microsoft Dynamics. The other software is Oracle. That's really good for project management. And the other one that we can also use is Tableau. So you guys can look for those. Let me put it in the chat. Give me 1 second. Let me put the 3 in the chat so that you guys can look into them. The textbook doesn't mention it, but I want to make sure that you guys know where you can go to look for help on creating project tools. And of course, you can also use Excel. So I'll just put Excel here. Tableau, Oracle, Excel, and I forgot one now. Anyways, doesn't matter. I'll tell you when we have the recording so you can go back. Yeah. So that is generally how it looks when we have to go about creating everything that is like from one. Like if you've got to create your work breakdown structure, then your activity on nodes per chart, and then your Gantt chart. So we're not going to do the Gantt chart now. Your Gantt chart, actually, we'll do it next week. But this week, I'll ask you to do your work breakdown structure. All right. So let me ask you guys, given that I've shown you what a work breakdown structure, a Gantt chart, and a PERT chart look like, right? The work breakdown structure is literally copied and pasted onto the Gantt chart, and then you just add the dates, etc. onto it. But yeah. What do you want to complete this week? Do you want to complete your work breakdown structure and your Gantt because those two are closer related? Or do you want to create your work breakdown structure and your PERT chart, since I spent more time on PERT today? If I know which two you want to do, I'll know how to carry on the rest of the class today. Nobody wants to give an answer? Okay, I'll just wait.
Yes, we can do any two.
Any two? Sylvester, I
Yeah.
see you typing. The first option, work breakdown and Gantt. All right, so I see you guys seem to be more comfortable typing in the chat. So just type Gantt or PERT based on which one you prefer to do. Because you still have to do the other one next week, right? But it's which two you think would be easier. Work breakdown and Gantt. Okay, so it seems like you guys prefer to do the work breakdown and the Gantt chart. So in that case, it's going to be the work breakdown structure and the Gantt chart. So I'll just hop back over to the Gantt chart so that you guys can see what it looks like. Yeah, I do think it's pretty simple, you know. So the only thing I would need to teach you all right now is I'm gonna have to show you how to calculate your late start and late finish. Let me pull it up on the textbook. Just give me a few minutes. I was gonna do Hi, Celine. All right, so I'm back, and let me just go ahead back to our presentation, right? So I'm going to use this one. All right. So when we look at this diagram, right, what we're seeing is that we essentially have activities A to E. Well, A to E along a critical path. But then we also have FGH that are activities that we want to do, but they're not along our critical path. So what we're going to do is to calculate really, so we're on PERT because I need to show you how to create Slack for your Gantt chart. Now, it's not something that you necessarily need to have on that chart. Like for your chart, what you should have is make it easy right now. Just put your work breakdown structure there, your start date, end date, as well as, yeah, just put start date, end date, and then put your markers for when you want to start date, last end date, and duration. You need to know how long you need to spend on it. So once you have those three, you will create your Gantt chart using that, right? So what you're going to do, I don't have a Gantt chart example on here. You know what? Let me go and find one. Varuna. Are you guys, I think you should be able to see my screen. I don't know if you are or not. And I'm literally just on Google. All right, can you see my screen like on Google?
Yes, miss.
Perfect. Right. So just like I just hopped onto Google and Googled something real quick, you guys can too, right? So this is how you are going to have your setup. Don't worry about having all the extra stuff that I had on mine. Just focus on having your task, right? So first, you're going to create your work breakdown structure. So you're going to say, okay, your WBS is there, and then you have your activity. So you're going to have the WBS, and then you have your major activity. So the major your major milestones. Under each milestone, you're going to have the activities that fall within them. So just like you have task 1, task 2, task 3 here on this example, I want you to have here, you're going to have, one is going to be your paper, which is going to be the last thing you submit. The next one is going to be a presentation. And then here for you, you can have, I don't know, whatever you guys want to have. Like you could have, it could be your mid-semester or your final exam, either one. So you're going to have each one of those, and then you're going to have how you're going to complete them. So for your final exam, you're going to have to make sure that one, you pass the mid-semester exam. So that can be one of the tasks underneath. You have to have time to study. So make sure you have a period of study, so that you can, read, do additional research, make sure you get all your terms defined so you understand the logic behind project management, right? Because we've gone through most of the theory in class very loosely. But the other thing that you do need to look at is you do need to look at the specific phases of your project and what happens in each phase, because you need to know what happens when, right? In which phase we pick a project manager, versus in which phase we might be creating our lessons learned, which phase we would be disbanding the team.
Excuse me, miss.
Hi.
Hi, don't mean to cut you, but we're still seeing the PowerPoint. We're not seeing Google.
Okay, sorry. Let me just get you guys over here. All right. Not sure why that was happening, but I'm going to pull it up now. All right. So here, we have the different tasks, right? So you can have your 3 major tasks or how many ever major tasks you guys want to have. Base this on how you think your project will work best and how best your team can interpret it. Under each task, you're going to have the specific activities, and then you're going to have the dates going across in chunks like this. It could be by week, but I would suggest maybe not by yeah, I would suggest the easiest thing to do, given that this is a short period, would be to use Excel, because you get lots of small blocks that you can just highlight and make an easy one. Don't try to do the very complicated one like I did. Don't try to put all the arrows and all that stuff. Like those are things that I needed to do for my project. Yours, I want to make it significantly easier. Just put your major tasks and then your activities under each task. Well, I don't know why they have it like this. Like it really is supposed to be an activity at the top and then the tasks inside it. Or anyways, yeah, so tasks, activity, or activities and tasks. I need to go double check the meaning of those 2 words because I had the inverse in my mind. But once you get past that, you're going to have your dates across here and you just put your dates down. So you need to know the start date for each one of your activities, as well as the end date for it, and the duration, which would be how long you're going to take on each one of it, right? So make something that looks similar to this. Don't make it very complicated. Yeah. So I was right. Like an activity is a scheduled phase in a project. And the tasks should be tasks in the activity. I don't know why this specific example has it like that, but yeah. Yeah, so the activity for this class, let's have the activity out here, and then inside we have different tasks inside the activities, right? I don't agree with the wording that they have on this example, but this is literally something I just Googled and pulled off the internet, right? So don't try to make it exactly like that. Let's stick with the actual terms. Not sure why this is happening here. Now, when you look at your textbook goes through a bunch of different things. So we do have Slack. You guys can look at how we calculate Slack. We're going to do that when we come to class next week. But for now, what you need is mainly here, like in project graphics in chapter 13, there is a whole space on Gantt charts, right? So this is what your Gantt chart looks like. It's all of the activities here. And then these. Now, between here, like outside of the activities, I do want you to have the dates here. So I do want you to have that space, but this is really what a Gantt chart looks like. And so your textbook does take you through a full explanation on how Gantt charts work and how you can create them. If you have any questions as a group, we can discuss them when we meet. So for now, for class, what you need to do is you need to get into your groups and you're going to do your work breakdown structure. If you do it in Excel, it would be easiest because you can have one worksheet. One worksheet that has your work breakdown structure on it, and then you can have another worksheet that has your Gantt chart on it. And then when you go forward and you have to do your PERT chart, you can also do your PERT chart right there in that same document. So if you want to use Excel, that would probably be the easiest software for you guys right now. Well, Microsoft Excel if you have access to Excel, or you can use Google Spreadsheets if you don't, right? But I would suggest you do. Another thing that you could do is, let me show you now. I have Excel open. I always have Excel open. And so what you could do is when you're using Excel, most of you should know that you can just go here to home and you can just search. So you can search Gantt chart. And while this here is going to pull through my computer and look for Gantt charts that I have here, you just search Gantt charts and they will give you some layouts of what Gantt charts could possibly, well, some examples of some Gantt charts that you can have, or you just go to new and you can just play around in here and look for it. So right here, you see charts right away. And as you go through, look, right away, we found a Gantt chart. Right? There's another one here. So lots of different Gantt charts they have available. So to make your life easiest, you can use Excel that already has a pre-made charts. You just open one up like this one, and then yeah, you end up in something like this. You've got light, dark, color. They made it really fancy. Right? So you just put your information in here, delete the spaces that you don't need, and then you just highlight how much ever you need to highlight. So if you have any trouble finding it, let me know and I can help you guys navigate whichever software your group chooses to use. I suggest Excel because it's the easiest for me personally. However, I do know that, not everybody has access to Microsoft Excel and it just gets more and more expensive every year. So I'm not going to put you into any expense to go getting a subscription, but Google Spreadsheets is free. I don't know if Google Spreadsheets has like, do they have templates? I don't know if they have templates. I've never used Google for templates, but I can take a look. Beyond that, I'm here to ask if you guys have any questions on your assignment. I'm going to put up the instructions. I'll write them tonight and put it up by tomorrow on your work breakdown structure as well as your Gantt chart. Given that it's separate assignments, I will have 2 separate file uploads for them. However, because I do advise that you guys use Excel where you can just keep everything in one place. You can just upload the same file in both places. They will both be due this week Sunday evening, Sunday at midnight. So take your time and get them done. The information that you need for the work breakdown structure, it just expands a little bit in the Gantt chart, and then you can play around with colors. I have I'm not going to tell you which colors you can use for your graphs. That is completely up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to have as your activities on your work breakdown structure. That also is up to you. But I do ask that I have a meeting with each one of the teams this week, so that I can make sure that everybody understands what they need to do for the remainder of the semester, and also that I can make sure that you all have enough that your topics are all in a topic that you can actually complete. Now, I did check Google, and I'm going to, I took out the thing. Let me present that again. So we're on the screen, not here, right? So I did check it, and I do see that Google has some templates. I don't often use them. I don't often use Google, so pardon my ignorance when it comes to this software. But I'm sure they have some sort. Look, see, they have Gantt charts right here, right? So you go into project management. There are different types of project management templates that you can use. So you do not have to create one from scratch. Just come on here or go to Excel and use one of the templates that they have available and customize it to whatever you need, right? For your work breakdown structure, that really is just a table. So it's nothing fancy at all. It's a basic table with some columns. Right? We've gone through all of the theory that we needed to with regards to our network diagrams for now. I do, however, have one last bit that we needed to go through today, and that was our logical framework analysis. Let me go ahead and present that. But before I present that, do we have any questions on Gantt charts or work breakdown structures? And tell me how are you guys feeling? Do you feel overwhelmed by the assignments, or do you feel like they're fair and that you'll be able to complete it by Sunday without issue? I want 2 responses. All right, Akeem, you joined a little bit late, right? So I know you missed some of what we talked about. So given what you have heard, the context that you have heard, especially with regards to your assignment, do you understand what's expected of you with regards to completing your assignments this weekend, Akeem?
Again, not 100% on knowing what I have to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know that we have to like create a project in terms of completing goals and like setting objectives and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct, or is there like a lot more to it?
No, you're correct, right? So with regards to just what you said, setting objectives, that's what we're doing now. So we're in, so we should have actually thought about what our objectives would be, and we would have general objectives in our initiation phase, which would have ended last week. This week is more focused on planning. So in the planning, while we should have had objectives, we are completing our objectives now. So your objectives are essentially going to be those same activities that are going to be on your work breakdown structure. So you guys can meet. And if you want to use your meeting with me to go through how your assignment should be, you can let me know and we can use it for that. So Amira, I do see a note from you that you're a little lost. If you tell me where you're a little lost, I can see if I can give you some explanation on that. So you can type it if you want. And I'll see what I can do to explain that a bit more. But the course being different from other courses that you've done, in what way? Yeah, we can discuss it when we meet. In what way is this course different from the ones that you've done? Anyone can answer. Okay, nobody? All right. So I'm not sure how the course is different. But yeah, oh, okay. Yeah, I think a lot of the business courses specifically, so like business I remember like the first year of UG, there was, I did have like a few economics courses and maybe one accounting course that had like stuff I had to physically work out and do, but everything else was just reading. And I do remember like my psych courses, they really beat me up because it was so much reading and interpreting. So if you're somebody that is much more into, being centered, reading, understanding the psychology, understanding social behavior and so forth, this course is going to be a little fast for you because, yeah, those are slower topics because it takes understanding and digesting. Whereas with this one, it takes doing all the time. So I can understand why that would be a bit of a change for you, but I'm here to support in any way that I can. And I don't want you guys to be too pressured. I just want you to be able to use project management tools when you're done, and not just for project management, like you can use these things for just life, right? And beyond that, I also want to make sure that you're able to complete at least the outline or the proposal of a paper, right? Because I do know that some of you have final projects you need to do. And I have heard that a lot of the courses right now don't have final papers in it. So I do want to have a short paper, right? So that's why my course has so much stuff in it and it might look different, but it's because I expect you to kind of just like work practically and just read when you have some time. And that's why I go through a lot of the theory in class and I leave a lot of the actual working on you guys, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the working, you should be doing it in teams. I do understand that, with technology and everything now, we tend to work separately and then just overview each other's work. But I would suggest for this course specifically that you work in groups when you're going to go about doing something, like for instance, your Gantt chart, because I don't want it to be that one person knows how to do the Gantt chart and then the next person has no idea what was even submitted. I do understand that I am asking for a lot, so that's why I allowed any one person from the group to submit it. And I'm not going to hover over you all to make sure that every single person is participating equally, but I suggest it because these are tools that you need when you go off to work. Yeah, and I also didn't give you guys like a personal paper to do. Like the only thing you have to do individually is going to be your 2 exams. Your mid-semester is going to cover mostly theoretical stuff. It will have a few workout questions, but because we're doing so much actual workings in the project, I don't want to put too much math in your paper. Your paper is going to be mostly theory, but your final exam will have about half of each. So it will have a paper, well, not paper 2, but 1 essay question where you will have to work something out, and then everything else will be theory, right? So that's how your test will go. But your assignments are structured in a group way so that you at least share the burden of all the working that you have to do. So, all right, Celine, go ahead.
Hi, Miss. I just want to know if both the test 1 and the test 2 will be online or in person.
Online. All of your tests will be online. It's going to be on Moodle.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. So the last thing we're doing today, and then I'll probably let you guys off at 8 o'clock. Yeah, about 8 o'clock. I'll let you guys go be free. Yeah. So last thing we need to do today is we need to look at our logical framework analysis. And so in it, usually what we're looking at is we're looking at the inputs that we have to put in. So what are your inputs? You see some listed here. Again, this is really just a picture I just pulled off of Google. But your inputs are anything that you need to put into the project. So yes, it's going to definitely be your human resources. When we think human resources, don't think like an HR department. Think people. So your team has somebody that manages the tech, somebody that manages paperwork, somebody that does a lot of the talking to people. Maybe that person is a really great people's person, excellent emotional intelligence, and lots of energy, right? So that person wants to go around, talk to people, push the product. So like a salesperson, and then you have one person kind of keeping everything in check and pulling everything together. And that person is usually your project manager, right? So your project manager skills would be generally skills of managing people and having some technical knowledge about about what product it is you're trying to produce. Why? Because they need to manage everybody as well as submit something that the customer wants. So they need to understand all the faculties of the project, right? You've got your finances, that is how much money you need to put in to get this project completed. Your materials, that's going to be, it could be raw materials that you might need to make something. So if I'm going to make some juice, I need some sort of fruit, I need some sort of sweetener, I need some water, I need a blender or something to squeeze, right? So what materials do you need to produce whatever it is you're trying to produce? It could be physical materials, it could be raw materials. It could be just research papers that you pull out of an archive, could be some books you get when you go to a library or something. But your materials are really those things that you go out and gather to come back and actually assemble whatever product it is you're going to assemble. And then the training is a very integral part of input. So a lot of times persons ask things of you without telling you how to do it. So as children, one of the very first skills that our parents have to teach us is how to eat, right? Something as simple as how to use a spoon. Seems crazy now looking back that somebody had to teach you how to use a spoon, but just like you understand that a child needs to learn things that they have to do for the first time, we also have to understand that our employees, sometimes, yes, they might have been working as an accountant for a few years, but maybe working as an accountant in a telecommunications company looks very different than working for a travel agency. So they have to do it differently, right? So there should be some level of training involved. I always try to make sure that people don't just understand what they need to do and have all the things they need to do it, but I generally try to have an understanding with that person on, how do you think you're going to go about doing this project? Like, what do you think is the first thing you're going to do? And you're probably not going to try to ask it in a way like that. Like, don't ask it in a way that you try to test them, because they're going to feel self-conscious about that. But you just make it into a conversation where you're trying to see, hey, oh, so you're going off to do that? Oh, what are you headed to do? Like, which part of the task are you going to tackle first, right? Just make it a light conversation. Make sure that they know what they have to do. Or look at what they're doing and just make sure that they're going in the right direction. But I would always suggest that you give people some sort of training, at least at the beginning of your project, so that, or at the beginning of the start of an activity, so that everybody understands what they need to do. And that they also understand that, my project manager is somebody that I can ask questions to, because sometimes they might feel too nervous to come and ask you questions. And if you haven't made it seem like you're an approachable person, even if they need training, they might not ask for it, right? So your inputs, it's pretty much everything that is coming into the project. Your outputs is what you're giving out. So whatever product it is you produce, if you made some plans for maybe a house, maybe your task, your project was to create a house plan for somebody. So whatever plans it is that you use to actually develop the product, those things can also be stored and used again in following projects. When we have studies and reports you can have as output. You've got information campaigns, legislation drafted. So all of these things would have taken different types of resources to go in, brainstorm, and produce something of quality to give to a customer. So you've got your inputs, which is what you're putting in, and then your outputs, that's what you're getting. Now your outcomes, while it sounds like your outcome, they sound similar. The outcome is how does it actually, well, not affect, because that's an impact, but your outcome really is how does it change, or what does it affect, right? Are you writing new legislation because the one you have currently is defective? Are you going to now write this new one into law? Is it going to be the new practice? Right? Are you looking for behavior change? Is that why you're going to say, okay, the input in this case is the child that is behaving badly. The output is that the child behaves better. But the output really could just be a discussion. Like we sit and we have a discussion with the person. The outcome after that is how the person behaves beyond the output. So yeah, we talk to the child, and then the outcome is going to be that, oh, my sister doesn't pinch me anymore. That could be the outcome. And then the impact is now I have a better relationship with my sister because she doesn't pinch me anymore. My sister doesn't pinch me, by the way. I'm the older one, I pinch her. But that's just an example of how you can kind of think of it. So for work, let's look at what we have. So in our assignments right now, your input is going to be, usually most of these projects have 2 people in them. So your input is going to be those 2 people, their skills, their knowledge, their interest. I didn't give you any budget, so your finances really should be 0. However, you do have to budget your time, right? So your time has to be budgeted as well as materials. So you do need some sort of software to do the course. So you're going to need some sort of processing software. So something to do a spreadsheet or to create your project documents on. And then the training, I've already gone through teaching you about each part of what you need to do. And I'm also going to meet with you again to make sure you understand again what you need to do. So I've given you all the inputs you need. Right? Your output is going to be whatever you submit, right? The outcome is going to be generally, if you're going to be able to like complete it in time or not. Like, yeah, you put all of these plans in place, but are you going to actually execute it when you're done? Right? It's great to take all the inputs, spend your time to create a budget. When you're done, you have this nice spreadsheet budget, that's your output. But are you gonna actually stick to your budget? Are you gonna actually spend exactly how much you need to and no more this month? That's gonna be the outcome. And then the impact is going to be, okay, so I didn't overspend this month. I actually got some savings and I feel better about my financial stability or security, right? So when we're looking at your outcomes and your impact really focuses on what happens more in a more long-term space, right? Your outcome is like almost immediate, and then your impact is going to be just how what you've done or what you changed, how it lasts for a little while. That's your impact. Right, so we have an example here. Just so you guys know, you were free to screenshot this at any point. It should also be, it's gonna also be there when I upload it to YouTube, but yeah. So that is your logical framework. Your logical framework is that you're putting something in, you expect to get something out, you expect that is going to actually be action, and you expect that it's going to have a positive effect on your company for a long time, right? That's logically how we approach projects, and that is the logical framework. Of course, your textbook does have information on it. I actually didn't even look at this specific textbook, if I'm being honest. Like, Here, let me Google. Let me not Google. Control F. Let me search for it in your textbook and tell you where it is. Okay. So your textbook seems to focus the logical, it seems to focus your logical framework into pricing only. And that's a little problematic. Just give me a second. Like I'm going through to see if it shows up anywhere else. I see it showing up here on risk management. Also, I thought they would probably have like like specific space in the textbook where they specifically discuss logical frameworks that we generally use in in project management, but it doesn't seem like they do. Let me okay. Okay, I see it mentioned in the space that we talk about the project manager. Yeah, like they talk about it when they're talking about management, they talk about it when they're talking about pricing. But they don't really speak on the logical framework outside of just those. Okay, they also mention it in regards to your work breakdown structure. And that's it. Yeah, they don't specifically speak about, yeah, this textbook, UG textbook, it doesn't go into detail about the logical framework and how it affects the projects as a whole. It really just focuses on logical framework and how we implement it in managing people. So they do talk about it with regards to managing the project, well, the project manager managing the workload for everyone. They talk about it again with regards to creating your work breakdown structure, because of course your work breakdown structure has to take a very logical approach, because in the planning phase, this is really where you apply it. You recognize what needs to be done, and logically which steps need to be taken inside of it. So which steps need to precede what steps. So that is all using logic. So we understand logic to basically be some sort of analog thinking, right? This leads to this, leads to that, leads to that. That's how logical thinking works. So while your textbook doesn't go into detail on how the logical framework works into all across your project, I do want you to know that it is a consideration at every single stage of your project. But it's needed a lot in the planning phase, right? So in your planning phase is really where you recognize and you solidify what you're doing, every single thing that you're doing, and what you're doing each part of it for. Yeah. So that's basically how logical framework works and how it integrates across the project as a whole. So while your textbook doesn't spell that out, I do want to tell you that logic has to be applied throughout your project, right? And it's applied basically in this same framework. And I'm pretty sure you can just recognize that it really just mimics how we operate in real life, right? Everybody has an impact that they're looking for. So oftentimes what we do is we start here, right? For us, for me, I had a particular image of what I wanted for my life from very, very young. And I just figured out what I needed to do to get there. And I figured out my end goal. I went and I spoke to people that had that were in a position that I wanted, and I worked my way backwards. So at first I thought I wanted to be an accountant. I asked my mom if she has any accountant friends. I think my dad, and I met one of my dad's friends. I asked him about, life as an accountant, and I realized, I like accounts, but I don't think I want to be an accountant. And so I did that for a few jobs until I found one that I liked. So that was my me applying the logical framework to my own life, right? So you can do that for your own life. You can do that for the project, and you should do it throughout all projects that you do. Everything that you do, think about the impact that it has on the whole of whatever organization it is, and know what outcomes you want, what outputs you want, and what inputs you therefore have to put in. Right? So you apply it this way, but you think about it in the opposite way. I'm gonna stop here, and we will just discuss anything else that you guys want to discuss before we close off. I don't want to take you guys through anything more today. I think this was enough. We also went all the way into Gantt charts that we didn't really plan to. So when we meet next week, I'll take you through cost management, and then we're going to go into project control. If you look at your schedule, what we're doing is today I went through everything for part 4, which was effective project planning. And we also ended up touching on implementing and managing the project, where we talked about the Gantt chart, right? Because Gantt chart is it's not something we use. It's really not a planning document, right? It's more of a control document. It's for you to look at every single day as you are executing and controlling the document. That's really where we use it. However, it can be created in the planning stage because it really just copies and pastes and applies more logic to our work breakdown structure, which we absolutely need to start our project. Right, so for now, you all just have to submit your work breakdown structure as well as your Gantt chart on Sunday. So we've already started tapping into next week's work. I will ask you to just kind of read, as you do the Gantt chart, I will ask you to read up on Gantt charts as it is stated right here in your textbook. Like, just read what's here in the textbook as you create yours. But that's it for now. When we meet on Monday, and I am praying that nothing happens next Monday. But yeah, we should have class on Monday. And when we meet, we're gonna go through cost management, and then we're gonna head straight into project control. I'm gonna touch on resource management also, but we've touched on that before, so it's not gonna be too much. So I'm gonna upload your 2 assignments for you. I'm gonna put them up tonight or tomorrow, and you're going to submit those on Wednesday, but you can start thinking about them from now. The only other thing you need to tell me is when you guys are free for a 15-minute to half an hour. Don't book me for more than half an hour conversation on your project, right? So just let me know which times you have free. I will put what times I have available onto Moodle, and you will just tell me where in there you're available. If I have a clash, I'll let you know. So for now, good night, goodbye. Have a good rest of your night. If you have no questions, anybody that has a question or wants to discuss anything with me can stay on the call and we can talk. What are some of the disadvantages while doing what? What are y'all? What are you talking about? Amira? Amira, are you still here? Okay, it doesn't seem like she's here anymore, but she asked me for disadvantages. I don't know if it was me she was asking for disadvantages or one of you all, but I will reach out to her online and find out about that. I can't think about what I was talking about that had disadvantages.
Miss, I think she was asking when you were talking about when you wanted to become an accountant.
Oh, the disadvantages of being an accountant?
Yeah, I think it's that.
Oh, yeah, I just realized I'd be bored. That was it. I realized that as an accountant, I'd only like I really would. It's just too repetitive for me. Let's just say that it got really repetitive really really fast, and I got really really bored. So I decided to. Well, I actually in high school I wanted to be an accountant, and it was mainly because I did really really well in accounting because I loved accounting. Simple math. And then I moved from accounting, and I did CAT right out of high school. So I did that for a year. Finished my first, I think I did like my first 4 or 6 papers, and then I decided to go to UG, and I went to UG instead and did business management that had accounting and then everything else inside. So that was why I decided to stop it. So I didn't give up on accounting. I just decided to I actually pretty much ended up in project management where there is the budgeting that does it does have my love for accounting in that, but it just doesn't get that repetitive because that's one part of project management. The rest of project management is talking to people, it's working on deals, it's trying to appease to people, dealing with psychology and all of that. Not necessarily manipulation, but trying to move things in my project's favor, right? So I found project management to be really, really exciting. And just fun. I found it to be a lot of fun. I found that I enjoy working with different people on different teams. I worked in telecommunications, mainly in HR. I worked in aviation, in the aviation industry in HR. I worked at a bank, just selling financial products, and like I just like different things. So because of that, I found that putting it all together and just working on specific projects independently for people, I found that that works very well for me. But if you're somebody that likes not necessarily things that are repetitive, but you just like calming jobs, accounting is a great one. It's a great job for somebody that likes that stability and that peace, because it does have a lot of peace. HR has no peace in it. But yeah, that was just me. I'm too much of an energetic person to really stay still for too long. So project management worked in a way that accounting didn't. But that was it. That was my disadvantage. Other people have other disadvantages. But yeah, careers are fun. But I find that now we can, move between different careers as we feel fit. So I'll stop here talking about myself, and I'll ask if anybody has any questions that you want to ask. Beyond that, you guys have a good rest of your night, and I will meet with you next week, Monday. No questions?
No, miss. Good evening.
Good evening. All right, so then I'll end the meeting. You guys have a great night. We'll meet again next week. Well, actually, we're going to meet during the week.